Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour. My name is Amy Wheeler and I'm your host. And today I want to talk about starting new things and doing hard things. This seems to be a theme that I have seen myself and my students going through. And I think it's something worth examining and giving ourselves empathy for, because anytime we put our heart into something new and want to give it a go, it is very delicate. It's very, very vulnerable. So what kind of spurred this was me talking to some of our students at Optimal State about having to start, building a business and to get themselves out there. And we had a discussion last week in our business class about showing up authentically and really allowing people to see who you are so that they can decide if they want to engage with you and your services or not. That basically, if we don't put ourselves out there authentically, we are not even going to attract the right people, much less retain them. So first, there was a whole lot of self-reflection on, am I showing up authentically? And for most people in that discussion, I think it came back to, wait a minute, do I even know myself authentically? Do I know who I am before I can even project out to anybody else who I am? Let them decide if they're going to choose me or not choose me. I have to do this deep internal work of accepting who I am, figuring out what areas of my life that I've been masking to try to please other people, figuring out all those places in my life where I'm actually not being true to myself, where I'm abandoning myself so that I can show up in the way I think other people want me to show up. So that could be a whole podcast in and of itself. Maybe I have to do that one also. But we can just talk about it for just a few minutes here. Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour, Season 7. We are so happy that we can share this time together each week. It's a really important part of our week, and I hope that it is for you too. We also want to invite you to the Optimal State app for iPhone and for Android. Your first month is free. We're going to start offering meditation circles for new moon, for full moon, for the solstices and the equinoxes. We're going to build a community around this app. So why not jump over to the iPhone store or the Android store, download the Optimal State app for free, and start to join our community and start to have more resources in addition to the podcast. We'd love to see you over there. There's this really cool exercise that helped me to understand where are the areas where I'm having some cognitive dissonance between who I am, what I believe in, how I want to show up in this world, and maybe what other people are looking for from me, whether that's society or family members or partners or friends or colleagues. And I'm going to invite you to try this exercise. This is just one of many, but it's interesting. Right now, turn off the podcast and write down a bunch of areas of your life that you've been thinking about lately. What are you having in terms of nutrition and nourishment? What is it like to drop your kids off at school, and how is that for you? Just anything, really. How am I caring for my pets? What did my friend say the other day that's kind of been on my mind a little bit? How do I say this hard thing to my boss without getting fired? Or how do I express my needs to my neighbor who's complaining about my weeds? Just anything that comes to mind, just to write them down on a list and go for about 8 or 10. Okay, so you're going to go do that. You're going to shut off the recording and then you'll come back. And now you're back. You have your list. All right, so here's what you're going to do. It's an association thing. You're going to turn off the recording again, and you're going to read number 1 on the list, and then you're going to write a word that makes you think, something, the word that comes to mind for that task. So you'll just go down your list of 8 to 10 things. And if it said the neighbor's complaining about the weeds in the yard, what word comes to mind? That's it. That's the exercise. Okay, so turn off the recording again, go down your list, give the one word that goes with each of the things that's been on your mind. Once you do that, come back and see us again. Okay, you're back. Now, I don't care what words you wrote down. That's insignificant to the exercise. What I want you to pay attention to is how long did it take you to write down each word, if you could even come up with one. So go back through your list now and estimate, okay, this one, it happened immediately. I understood it. Let's do it. This one, I had to think about it for 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. Or this one, I never could come up with a word. So please turn off the tape one more time and then write about how long it took you in each one of those little things to come up with the word. The word is insignificant. What I want to know is how long did it take you? Remember, this is an exercise about being true to yourself and knowing yourself and being authentic. All right, go do it. I'll see you back in a minute. All right, that's it. That's all the steps that I wanted you to take. And I'm going to argue, and you can reject or accept this. It's really up to you. But this was a powerful exercise for me when I did it, that the areas where we get a word immediately and it's clear and yep, that's what it is, moving on. Those are the areas we're not having such cognitive dissonance and that we're clear. Like, this is how I feel. This is what it is. And then the areas that took a really long time, that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in those areas, that there's a push and a pull, and maybe this, maybe that. Oh no, what about that? Oh, I can't write that word down. What if so-and-so found this piece of paper? Like, honestly, all that stuff that was pushing and pulling you, those are the areas where you're having some confusion, probably, again, hypothetically, and that you may not be very clear on who am I, why am I here, how am I showing up, and what are my values? What are the values that I am committed to? And so when I did that, I found many areas where there was a long time before I could come up with a word, if I could even come up with one. A lot of times there are like 4 or 5 words in all different directions, and that tells you something too. And so I knew in my heart that those were the areas where maybe I wasn't having clarity and I wasn't really getting down to business with myself and being honest with myself. I was very torn in multiple directions. And that's not to say that our issues can't be complex. Of course they can. But what should not be complex, ideally, is our response. That even in the midst of a complex situation, like I'm a renter, my landlord said that they would take care of the weeds, but now the neighbors are mad because they think I'm supposed to take care of the weeds, but my landlord won't actually respond to my text. So now I have to face the neighbor. Like, even in a triangulated situation like that, ideally there would be clarity, such as I've texted my landlord. It's on her plate. It's her job. Everyone agrees upon that. And I'm not going to worry about it, because if the neighbor asks again, or we see the neighbor, I'll say, the landlord is supposed to be taking care of this. And I don't feel bad about that. I'm not going to feel bad about my weeds because the landlord has it in her to-do list, right? So that's the kind of thing, if I would take that on and somehow feel like I had to fix everything, and that would be a different set of values, right? But I know myself well enough, authentically enough, to be able to look the neighbor in the eye and say, that's not my job. Thank you very much. And as much as I would like them pulled, it's not something that we've agreed that I would do. So anyway, just to say, find those areas of your life that you're having some of that cognitive dissonance, that you're really not sure which direction to go, that you're thinking one thing, acting another, saying something you don't really mean. I find myself doing this too, and maybe this will be helpful. I think about conversations that are about to happen. And I imagine, like, oh, they're probably going to say this, and then I'll respond this way. And I have to ask myself, is that true, Amy? When you say, I'd love to see you again in person in a few weeks, like, is that true? Because if it's not true, why are you saying that? You're setting up the expectation that you're going to get together in the near future. And that's not your intention. And being pleasant and kind is a lovely quality, but standing somebody up and then not contacting them because you never had any intention to, that is not kind. That is not pleasant. That is not authentic. And that's not the kind of person you want to be in the world. So start noticing those times when you say things that you don't really mean and that you have no intention of following through on. So just to say, getting to know yourself, your authentic self, takes a lot of work. Another way you could do it is to be honest about your feelings and your needs. I don't think I told this story on the podcast, but I'm going to briefly tell it. I was in a situation recently where we were in a small group and two of the members were having a conversation about me, with me standing 10 feet away, and they pretended I wasn't in the room. And so I really, during that hour that we were all together, I was in my own head thinking, well, how did that make me feel? It made me feel unseen, unheard, undervalued, as if I don't exist. And then I started feeling like, wow, I don't even belong here. I don't feel a connection with these people. And so that unmet need to feel seen and heard and connected with and valued in the group, I had to be honest with myself that that group wasn't meeting that need for me. So I went to one of the members of the group and I said, I'm feeling sad because you were pretending I wasn't here. And I want you to know that that made me feel like I don't belong here. And that person was mortified that I said that to them, but that's okay. They can take responsibility for their emotions, and tried to correct it and apologize. Another person that I went to, the teacher in the situation, and said, here's what happened for me in our group the other day, brushed it off and said, oh, we were just joking. Whew, I did not like that response. And now I have to be very honest and authentic with the teacher and say, you ignored me, you pretended I wasn't there, as if I don't exist, and I couldn't hear you. And now you're telling me it was a joke. That's not okay with me, right? So these are the kind of small things in the big picture of life, right? But very big to me, because this is a place I go for nourishment and for support and to get my needs met and to be healthy in many ways, mentally, emotionally, as well as physically. So it actually is a pretty big deal to me if I have to feel awkward or uncomfortable or like I don't belong. So these are small examples of getting to know yourself and seeing what you're willing to put out there and be okay with. Do I like it that I'm going to be perceived as the troublemaker or the one who's being, picky or sensitive? No, I don't love that. But I also am not a type of person that can put on a mask and smile and pretend and override my own nature and let people treat me poorly. Like that doesn't work for me. I know how that ends up. That ends up with me telling somebody off in a more harsh way in the future. I've seen that pattern. That ends up with Minnesota rage coming out. So, all to say, first step, get to know yourself. And that could take years, by the way. That is yoga. Second step, be willing to put yourself out there and let people decide if they like you or don't, if they want to be in your presence or not, whatever they want to think about you. It's their stuff. And get really comfortable with that and let people know, hey, this is who I am. Even listening right now, some of you are going, oh my gosh, I am mortified for Amy Wheeler. Wow, she is making too big of a deal out of XYZ. Why the heck would she do that? And others of you are like, oh no, I love this role modeling that she's giving us. And I totally want to be a person that can do that. Or I am a person that is like that. And I have to be okay with everybody having their opinion about me and people deciding yes or no about my ability to speak the truth with kindness, to have first and second yama of yoga, the ahimsa, the nonviolence, and the satya, which is speaking truth. And so once we get past that, here's who I am. I'm willing to put myself out in the world. Then it becomes much easier to try new things and do hard things. I would say trying new things and doing hard things before you've done the first two steps that I just mentioned, really, really hard. Really, you're going to feel super insecure. You're going to feel like there's no foundation beneath you. You're going to question yourself, have self-doubt, have anxiety, lose sleep, because you truly don't have a foundation of knowing who you are and loving yourself unconditionally to lean into. I always say, I am wrong a lot of the time. But if I don't put myself out there honestly and authentically and let someone tell me, let someone pop my little bubble to tell me how I'm wrong, I'm never going to figure it out. So I might as well step in and be wrong. And a lot of times in these difficult situations, I'll say, I could be totally off here. I actually know that I don't know everything. I'm humble enough to understand that I don't see the big picture all the time. So please enlighten me if you need to. But here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I'm sensing. Here's what my needs are. And being willing to do that takes courage. It takes faith. It takes trust in yourself that you might hear something you don't want to hear. But none of us needs to be perfect. Why do we need to be perfect? If we can go through the world being good enough, or maybe even not so good, like it's okay. Why do we have to show up as these perfectly, humans, these perfect humans that get everything right? We're never going to get that. And I think what's holding us back from starting new things and doing hard things is that self expectation that we're going to be perfect. And number two, having the illusion that we can control what anybody else thinks of us, whatever their judgments are of us. It is fascinating. This next thing this is yogic philosophy. It is fascinating when you really get down to it to say there is a reality, but none of us will ever agree upon it. As you listen to this podcast, there is an entity named Amy Wheeler, but none of you will agree upon who she is, how she moves through the world. You're all seeing me through your own projection. You're all seeing me through your own wounds. You are all seeing me through your trauma, your biases, your judgments, your joys, your celebrations, your life experience. Like, I don't exist for you independent of you. When you look at me, when you talk to me, when you connect with me, it is through your lens. And therefore, I don't have to worry because whatever you're thinking of me is your business. It's not my business. Now, do I sometimes like to know those things so I can determine if I think your judgment of me is valid or invalid, or if there's anything I can learn, or if there are ways I can improve or grow? Yes. And I will pick selective people that I'm close to and love and have trust with to give me that feedback in a way that I can hear that. And sometimes strangers do too, and that's fine also. Sometimes those are the best ones because there's no attachment there. It's like, oh, they get some feedback. Okay, right? But the truth is that your perception of me is not actually me. The thought that I can control that with multiple people, multiple times a day, with the 500 to 800 people a week that listen to this podcast? No, I can't control any of that. There's zero, zero, zero control of what you think of me. Once I realize that I am in a complete delusion, trying to manipulate you to see me in the way that I want you to see me, it becomes much easier to let go of my expectations to show up in a way that will please you. The only thing I can do is try to be true to myself, try to be the best person I know I can be, the best version of myself, and openly wait for feedback to see if I have misperception in any given moment, which I often do. Just ask my husband. And so this is to say we kind of have to let go. We kind of have to surrender to this process. And it's hard, especially with family, friends, people that there are really high stakes for them having a particular perception of you and letting them think you're a little weird, letting them distance themselves, letting them have judgment of you, and then still showing up and being that good-hearted, benevolent person that you want to show up as, even if it's not the person that they think you need to be. And the people that stay, let's do this. We may have differences, but you're accepting partially who I am. And the people that don't want to stay, it's okay too. Send them off with love. All right, so authenticity 101. If we can get to that point, and if all of that sounded like, oh my gosh, that's a lifetime of work. Yes, it is a lifetime of work, especially for women, because we have been told that we're supposed to show up in a certain way. What's the thing that's going around TikTok right now? I'm demure. I'm, kind. I'm cutesy. Or, there's this really funny meme going around right now. That's how we're expected to show up. And I'm here to tell you there's many ways to show up in the world. There's many ways to let your light shine. And we don't have to model ourselves after some archetype that actually isn't in alignment with our true nature. Nothing could be worse than going through life trying to fit yourself into an archetype that you think someone else wants you to be that is not your true self. Oof, that is rough. Let's not go there. All right, so we've gotten to this point where you're still listening and you're like, all right, I've done some work around authenticity and allowing others to have their perception of me. Now what? How do I start new things? Well, I'm going to tell you, you already did the hard work. Starting new things requires vulnerability. It requires a level of self-trust. And here's the key words. You will know what to do when you get there. That's it. It's like going on a 20-day hike. Let's say you're going on the Pacific Crest Trail. You've got your backpack, you've got your tent, you've got your little cook stove or whatever they bring on this Pacific Coast Trail. I've never done it actually, but you're not going to be able to plan out those 20 days ahead of time and figure out we're going to this stop, this stop, this stop. You might have that in your head, but you also better know like that's probably not going to happen. Weather's going to hit. You're going to get terrible blisters. You're going to want to stop and rest for a day. Like it's not going to go as planned, but it doesn't matter. Because if you trust yourself to know what to do when you get to that moment, that's all you really need. It's good to have a plan, knowing you will deviate from the plan. So this is the key to trying new things and doing really hard things. Formulate all that you can ahead of time, and then move in with presence, move in with attention and focus, move in with a positive attitude, and trust yourself. That's it. Trust that I will know what to do when I get there. Now, some of our students, as I said, they were the inspiration for this podcast. We're like, well, what if I get 20 minutes into a session with my client and like there's nothing more to talk about, or there's awkward silences, or I can't remember what to do next. And I just said, okay, create 3 alternatives, 3 things that you know you can go to if you end up having way too much time, meaning teach them how to do diaphragmatic breathing. That could take 20 minutes in and of itself if taught properly. Teach them about a Yoga Sutra 1.1 through 1.3. Have that in your bag that you can pull that out if you need to. Teach them a few postures and do a co-negotiated assessment together. How does that feel? Where do you feel that? Like you can have those tools ready in case you get into this really awkward, weird place. But my guess is once you know you have that, then you can just move in and be present to the human being in front of you. And we were talking about, well, what happens if we just end up talking the whole time in the session? Isn't that talk therapy? Isn't that, what a clinical psychologist would do? And I said, absolutely not. Our scope of practice is to be an active listener, paraphrase, have empathy, have compassion, ask them what their feelings are, ask them what their needs are. Trust me, if you just go in with that, I'm going to be present to this human being. Usually it's going to work out. Usually they're going to have a whole lot to say and they're wanting to be heard and seen and understood and paraphrased and given empathy to. Like that's just being a good human being. That's not just a yoga session. That's how we should move in the world. That isn't talk therapy. And yet it's so rare that someone would come with a non-judgmental attitude and be present to another human being. And it's powerful. And so I think, if you just go in with that attitude, you're going to be fine. And if you get someone that is not a talker, that, ask a question and they give a 3-word answer over and over, well, you've got your breathing techniques, you've got your Yoga Sutra, and you've got your postures that you can do a co-assessment with, right? You're covered. And then once that happens, you can just sit back and really enjoy the connection with this other human being. And I would say that's true for anything new. Anything new. I started giving presentations at corporations on emotional intelligence, which is just yoga. It is self-awareness. It is self-reflection. It is self-actualization. It's all the same skills. It's giving empathy. It's having an understanding of taking the perspective of another human being, pratipaksha bhavana, we call it, and stepping into their shoes. Like the tenets of emotional intelligence are all packed right into yoga and yoga philosophy. So I've been starting to give these presentations to corporations and feeling a little bit like a fish out of water the first few times, like, ooh, this is different. I've got CEOs out there. I've got, department chairs. I've got people that may not be open to the messages that I want to give, but I have my little PowerPoint and I had my backup plan, how I'm going to fill space if I need to. If it gets awkward or silent or uncomfortable and they won't answer any questions, here's my plan. And then I set my mind to showing up authentically as a good human to the best of my ability to give them value and see if there isn't a way I can be of service to them. That's all I did. I just walked in and I said, has anybody ever heard of something called emotional intelligence? And out of, 20 people, 2 people had heard of it. The other 18 didn't know why they were there and didn't really want to be there. And then I said, well, have you ever wondered why your teenager is acting the way they are and not been able to understand that? Okay, a few more hands come up. I said, have you ever felt lonely at work because you just don't feel like part of the team? A few hands go up. And you just start working with them as human beings with real life problems, trusting that I would know what to do in the moment. And that goes back to authenticity and knowing yourself. I think so many times we show up thinking it's about the information. And I've even seen this with high level yoga teachers who have so much knowledge and they want to make sure they give the information out in a particular way where they can feel like they did it in an articulate way, in a way that actually it's almost like a performance, so they can feel good that they did their job. Honestly, those are the worst sessions ever. The counter to that is the teacher who shows up with a plan, willing to let go of that plan. Of course, there is a plan, but you're willing to let go of it. That just thought, I want to connect with people. That's my goal. Let's connect and we'll see what information we get through. And I actually had this happen just last week with a country in Asia had asked me to come and give some talks, and we had a translator. And I was thinking, oh no, they're not going to like this American woman, and all the reasons I could put myself down for why they might not engage with me. And thinking to myself that it's just going to be this lecture and nobody's going to want to participate and blah, blah, blah. All these projections from Amy onto these lovely Asian students. There was no truth to it. They got into the lecture. They loved hearing everything that I was talking about. They were asking questions, even to the dismay of their host, like, nobody's ever been this curious before. What's going on here? But it's because I decided to show up authentically and focus on connection. And if we got a bunch of nice information across, great. If not, I'm not going to worry about it. The connection is the most important thing. So that's how you start new things. That's how you do hard things, is you take it away from the performance and you make it about your presence. You co-regulate. And I know you've all heard this over and over and over, but then you still push yourself back into perfectionism. You still push yourself back into, well, Amy said that on the podcast, and that's all fine and dandy, but I have to give a good presentation or I won't be hired again. I would argue the opposite, and I would ask you to reflect on this. I would argue that even if your presentation and your information wasn't perfect, but they felt connected to you, that is what's going to get you asked back. And not only that, that is going to be what makes you want to come back. Who wants to go and work in any situation where you don't feel like there was a connection? It's just empty. It's a horrible, lonely feeling where you're left evaluating yourself after the fact, wondering if you're good enough. And your naughty little mind will eventually tell you, you weren't good enough. And you'll have to work through that. I had a friend recently who may be listening to this now who said, oh, I didn't do a good job. I'm sure there's going to be so many people that didn't like what I presented. And I just wrote back, honey, you got to check your negativity bias. Like, to assume they are not going to like this beautiful, wonderful thing that you put out into the world from your heart that was so touching and so amazing. Like, why would you even think that? And she basically said something to the effect of, the internet is a harsh place. Everybody has their opinions and they're mean. And yeah, but those people don't matter. Those are just keyboard warriors. They don't actually matter to us. And honestly, if they had something of value to say, we would consider that. But in general, if you put this beautiful thing into the world and they're judging it and saying mean things about it, well, that's their problem. That's a reflection of their mind. That has nothing to do with you. Those are two very separate things. So we keep coming back to this idea. Now, you might say, but what about a narcissist? What about somebody who isn't taking any feedback? What about somebody who basically should be feeling badly about how they're doing because they're doing horrible things? Well, those people aren't having this conversation. I'm just going to tell you, they don't have self-awareness. They don't long to be self-regulated. They don't long for connection. They long for power and control and manipulation and getting everything their way all the time. Those people are not doing the work that I'm talking about doing. They're not trying to find their authentic self. They're not trying to learn to trust themselves. They have a whole different agenda. And I give you permission to walk away from those people. Back up slowly with a smile so you don't make them mad and have them come chasing after you to try to beat you up. But you got to get those people out. Yes, I give you complete permission to let those people go. I'll tell you another little story that happened the other day. I was at a store and I was listening to the cashier talk to a customer, and the customer was being blatantly homophobic, like talking the most horrible things to the cashier. And the lady in line and myself, we kind of looked at each other like, what in the world is going on right now? And thank goodness for Heidi, the woman that was standing in line next to me, who I did not know. She just piped right up and is like, I can't believe you're saying these things. This is a horrible thing to say. I would never, ever, ever wish what you're saying on anyone. And you really need to think about how you're acting. And I was like, wow, go Heidi. And of course, she and I got to know each other and exchanged texts afterwards so we can be friends. But like, that's what I'm talking about. Heidi didn't give a shit. She did not give a shit. She was like, this is right. I am speaking truth. This woman is doing horrible things in public, and I'm not going to let it slide. And I don't want to let it slide. So as she was doing it, I gave her a thumbs up. I'm like, yeah, I'm right here behind you, girl. I got your back, to let her know that I 100% agree with what she was saying, and that if anything should come to pass, I'm ready to throw down. So some of you will be a little more active. Others of you will give the thumbs up and be a little more passive if you're not in that moment. But don't be afraid to be you. Don't be afraid to speak your truth and just let the chips fall. I think that's the other thing with trying new things and doing hard things. We have to be 100% okay with failure, with letting chips fall, with letting people not like us, with having long-term consequences of our actions. We have to be okay with that. You have to sit with yourself and say, am I okay with it? And get honest. Are you okay with it? Yes, I'm okay with it. Because the alternative of masking, pretending, being inauthentic, being a perfectionist, holding myself back from the things I really want to do and try, ugh, that just sounds like a horrible life. I am not going there anymore. I spent my 20s in that zone, being careful and perfect and trying to please everybody. Oh my God. I'd never want to go back to that. So, we can be okay with the long-term consequences. And if we find out that we have not been very skilled, we haven't been very refined, we haven't done it perfectly, and maybe we even hurt people, we can go back and apologize. Apologizing is not hard. To say, look, I did this wrong. I don't like how it came out, or I don't actually agree with what I said the other day, or like, apologies are fine now. That person may not want to connect with you. They may be done with you, but it's okay. It's okay if some people are done with us, if they don't like our apology. Chances are those are the same people that would never give an apology, quite honestly. The people that would do things that are hurtful and not take responsibility and not see their part in it and not be in connection with you. So, do you really want that in your life anyway? I don't think you do. This is all about getting clarity. I feel like what I'm saying today is it's okay to let jerks go out of your life and just do your thing. Like, there is an element of that, but I also want to stress that all of this should be done with a certain amount of self reflection, looking at yourself deeply, practicing yoga daily, whether that be postures or breathing or meditation or chanting, getting wise counsel from your teachers to see if you're clear or not. I'm not saying like go out there and be a live wire and just go off on everybody and think it's my way all the time and I get to be who I want to be. And if you don't like it, too bad. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm assuming that the people listening to this podcast are already yoga people. They already are highly sensitive. They're already doing a lot of this really deep work on themselves. And with that baseline, I'm asking you to have a little faith in yourself, a little more trust in yourself, because 90% of the people I see are too far on the end of the scale where they're taking responsibility for everything and trying to be perfect and trying to make everybody happy and trying to be the best person they can possibly be. They're too far on that end. So I'm giving you a little push towards the other end, which is to allow your true self to come out and be a little more firm and a little bit more authentic, and just let yourself speak your truth. Let yourself speak your truth. The worst thing that can happen is someone may not like you, and it's okay. I had several conversations this week where I risked people not liking me. And you know what? I had 4 different times this week that happened. And in all 4 times, it has turned out okay. Not perfect, but pretty darn good because I was willing to be brave enough, courageous enough to step forward and be true to myself. And that worked out for me. Now, other times it may not work out for me. I may regret that. And then I can decide, do I need to apologize? Or am I like, okay, let's cut bait on this one. This one didn't work out, but that's okay. In the end, this person doesn't need to be in my life anyway. It's fine. It's not like black and white. There is a gray line that you're kind of walking back and forth across. But the point is, let's be authentic. Let's put ourselves out there and let people decide on us. And let's try new things. Let's do hard things. Let's show up. Let's be present. Let's connect. Let's give information as a secondary goal in the conversation. And let's see what happens. So that is what I leave you with. And again, thank you to our students at Optimal State for inspiring me to do this episode. As I see them walking this path, it's just so inspiring, and it feeds my soul to see such strong, competent, amazing, heartfelt people doing this work in the world and doing good in the world. So thank you all. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour. You can also see the video versions on YouTube. If you'd like to get early release, you can always support us as a Patreon member. If you'd like to find us on YouTube or Patreon, just type in the Yoga Therapy Hour and Optimal State, and you'll find us. All right. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you so much. A special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.